So first of all, I never recommended nationalizing a network. The study I did was a technical study. It was about physics, it was about science, it was about engineering, it was about how do we leapfrog China, who's actually taken quite a lead because we've been asleep at the wheel in 5G, and create the kind of technological revolution in the United States that will drive the next evolution of technological growth. That's what the study was about. And there were some key outcomes in that, one of which you have to recognize that the network itself is made for machines. It's not made for people. You won't see much difference in terms of how you interact with the internet, but you will see a difference in terms of machines interacting with machines and machines interacting with people. You know, the 4G network allows for 10,000 connections per square mile. The 5G network allows for 3 million. Now, we're not going to all of a sudden grow, 3 million people above the 10,000 in a square mile in the United States. We have plenty of connectivity for us to talk to each other. All those connections are for the machines. Some of those machines are big enough to run you over, like a self-driving car. So they actually bring danger. So if you look at the cameras today that are connected to 4G, we know that they're easily hackable and used in botnets for DDoS attacks. Now imagine that on a scale of 3 million devices within 1 square mile of us right now, that many of which could do harm to us. That is a big problem. But that's not the only problem. The United States led in 4G. Europe led in 2G, led in 3G, United States led in 4G. That meant the technology, the applications, the services, the business models that were built on top of 4G came from the United States. If you think about the mobile market, it was a combination of 4G networks and the smartphone that allowed for, things like Uber and Airbnb and all these different, exponential companies that are changing the way the world works in ways that add value to things. But more importantly, if you look at the technology underlying that system, it was built for the most part with Western values. Now what does that mean? The iPhone. The iPhone's encrypted. It's meant to be a privacy protecting device. Now, of course, when they added iCloud, you created a lot of problems because as soon as you move your data to the cloud, now you have, somebody has the opportunity to get after it. But at least on the iPhone itself, it's built to be hardware, software, integrated, encrypted so that your data was secure, right? That's because it was built by Apple, an American company that values privacy, okay? So China figured that if the U.S. could lead in 4G, it should lead in 5G, and it, actually started to think about this in 2009, 2008, before 5G even was a thing.
Yeah.
And the reason was they saw that the West had put their values into technology foundation of mobile computing, and they said, well, we want to control the standards and the technology foundation that drives the 5G world. Why? Well, our companies come from a nation that values privacy. Their companies come from a nation that absolutely does not value privacy. And so if you think about the alternative to the iPhone, which is, say, the Huawei Mate 10, right?
Right.
The Chinese law says, we need to have access to that. We need backdoors. We need backdoors in hardware, and we need backdoors in software. That's by Chinese law. And so if you look at the systems that are essentially in conflict today, there's two systems that really fundamentally bring this to mind. And one is the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe, and the Chinese cybersecurity law. Now, what is similar about those two laws? Europe is actually proud that they have an extraterritorial imprint on GDPR. In other words, it doesn't just apply to European companies, it applies to American companies, it applies to any company anywhere. If you're operating in Europe, then you have to abide by GDPR. right?
Right.
Well, China also has its cybersecurity law. It also has extraterritoriality. In other words, anywhere that China's interests are, and especially if you have an economic or financial relationship with China, which its global champions do, then it has to have its ability to get into the back door.
Essentially, it's full access
it's
for
full
the CCP.
Access.
Right.
So the problem with the world, it's advancing so much, and our connectivity through our digital lives is advancing so much, that our ability to create laws in the West has gone past our ability to actually enforce them in a digital space. In other words, GDPR is a law that is unenforceable in a digital sense, because if you look at it, the behavior that they were trying to stop is still going on. Google's still doing what it's doing. Facebook is still doing what it's doing. It's because it can't be enforced. China is building their enforcement mechanism in the technology. And so that means that they can enforce it. They can enforce it on the network. They can enforce it at the device level. They can enforce it through their undersea cable system. They essentially are taking control of the underlying technological structure, because they recognize that just writing a law is not sufficient in a digital world. You actually need the ability to divert data, to decrypt data, to monitor what's going on. And then if you need to be able to suppress speech, you need to be able to influence populations, you need to be able to influence individuals. What more powerful way to do that than with a hyper-connected 5G system that allows you to have access to devices, that allows you to, your companies to be dominant in e-commerce, that allows your companies to be dominant in surveillance and reconnaissance like DJI and what's the video company? Oh gosh, the cyber camera company that has artificial intelligence facial recognition. That's basically was sold in many of our military bases and others. So it is really looking at where the world is going and saying we need to build it at the technology layer, not at the paper layer that we're used to in a physical world, because just doing it at the paper layer is insufficient to actually control to the fidelity you want to.
The future of all technology, the backbone of the future of technology is 5G. It will be a dominant technology. Right now, the path that Huawei's taken as a front for the PLA is to basically take over the networks and the components throughout the world. If we allow this to happen, even for a couple more years, Huawei is going to control basically the communication systems of the West, and therefore will be able to control the West. Even as bad as nuclear weapons are, and they're terrible, even as bad as some of the opponents that we've had has been terrible, that has been fairly localize the damage that could be done. Right. This is something that could actually, and it can do it in a stealth manner. Remember, we're in 2019, and we're finally having the conversation about Huawei because the CFO was arrested in Canada, within the past year. Up until then, if you go to Europe, you see Huawei in the billboards, you see Huawei in the stores. There's been absolutely no discussion. The elites have let down the citizens of both Canada, the United States, and Western Europe. And now this film is the beginning of the exposure of that.
So, to your point, I looked on the Huawei's website, and Huawei claims to currently serve 3 billion people around the world.
Yes.
It has almost 200,000 employees. 170 countries, penetration in 170 countries. I had someone, an old student of mine, text me and say, hey, all our cell towers in around Vancouver are Huawei. Is that a problem? Wow. It feels like it's been under the radar. How did this happen?
Well, one of the things, there's an indictment out there. The reason she's under house arrest in Canada today was this indictment. They want to extradite her to the United States. This indictment, when you read it, and here's the thing, nobody in this town's read it. Okay. I'm talking about people in power have not read it. You've got to go read, and we're going to put it up on the website, you've got to read the indictment of Huawei. It starts back in 2007. This has been a history of their nefarious activity for quite a while, and it has never really gotten exposure, really hasn't gotten any media exposure. Part of that is the misinformation campaign that the Chinese Communist Party represents. People should understand, this is not about China. It's not about the people of China. The people of China are some of the most hardworking, decent people on earth. They're enslaved by a radical totalitarian surveillance state of the Chinese Communist Party, and really a radical cadre inside that Communist Party that suppresses and enslaves the Chinese people. Huawei is a methodology, a high-tech methodology to basically have domination over the world. The investigation in the United States started in 2007, so it's 11 years. And they're indicted for multiple causes, right? Okay. And so when you read the indictment, you sit there and go, why did it take so long to do this? Why did both the Bush and the Obama administration, kind of look the other way while investigators at the Department of Justice and other places were pursuing this? And so people have to remember also, and we don't really bring this up in the film because there's just too much to get done in an hour, but when she was arrested in Vancouver, it was the same time virtually the dinner is going on in Buenos Aires of President Xi and President Trump, which at that time was the most important. It was around, I think, the G20 meeting. Okay. It was the most important meeting that they had in discussions about various topics, and particularly about the trade war, what I say is the economic war that the CCP has been running against the United States, Canada, and the Western democracies. While that dinner's going on and they're having a very tough conversation, she's arrested during that dinner.
Do you think that's intentional?
Here's what I think. I think that it's not intentional. I believe that now what you're seeing in the United States, and this is what's changed under President Trump, it's the reason the other day he says, I'm the chosen one, and kind of tongue-in-cheek, but he went through a litany of, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, since Tiananmen Square.
Okay.
We have looked, the Western elites have looked the other way on China's behavior. They've let the CCP promise and then lie. Okay, promise and then lie. Promise and then lie, and get their way the entire time. And what Trump is saying, he says, I didn't ask for this. It'd be very easy for me to cave and to give them what they want and just kick the can down the road, which every other administration has done. But I'm not going to do that. They're engaged in economic war against us. They've been lying to us. They've been having cyber theft against us. We're going to actually now confront this. And it's not going to be totally pleasant, but it has to be done. And that's what he says, I guess I'm the chosen one, right? But he's made a decision. He saw today with this really throwdown that President Trump had, he's not going to back off this. What I think you've seen the sea change in the United States is that people call it the deep state. I don't. I think the apparatus of the national security apparatus, which the Justice Department is one, is now fully engaged in this economic war that China is running against us. And I think in the normal course of business, in the Justice Department, they finally decided they're going to act upon this indictment. Right? And by the way, the indictment came down from a grand jury. Right. And that's why they acted upon it. And they went to Canada, the nicest people in the world, right? And convinced the Canadian authorities that you have to do this and you must do this for your own good. This is the power of the film. One of the powers of the film, and I think this is the reason the filmmakers were so brave.
The CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, it's not the government of China. It's kind of this parasitic organization that sits on top of all aspects of government and society. Is that's how I understand it?
Yes, parasitic. I would actually say it's a gangster organization. I think and that's why the only way to me that you can understand the CCP is as a parasitic or a mafia type operation. These are criminals that don't abide by any rule of law. What they've done to enslave the Chinese people is outrageous. What they've done to the Uyghurs, what they've done to the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan Buddhists, what they've done to the evangelical Christians, what they've done to Falun Gong, what they've done to the underground Catholic Church is unacceptable. It's unacceptable in a modern age that people that want to fulfill their own spiritual beliefs are not just suppressed, but actively gone after. I think also, if you look, there's no rule of law. So any entrepreneur, they decide that entrepreneur that they just want to take their business, they take their business. They want to take their assets, they take their assets. Listen, the people in Hong Kong are among the most orderly and decent folks on earth. If you've ever been there, it's basically a rock island with no resources that the grit and determination of the Chinese people, coupled with English common law, has created the third greatest capital market in the world. These are amazing people. And if you see, and they're hardworking, and they've been historically apolitical.
Right.
But what Hong Kong is about is business, okay, and focus. And here you see, every week now, millions of people in the streets, very polite with the umbrellas, cleaning up afterwards, kids studying, refusing to back down. And what are they doing? They're saying this extradition bill is actually their step to totally do away with the rule of law and be able to come in and take me, whatever they want to do, and send me to mainland China to some prison.
Stunning.
The reason I want to do this interview, I have said for a long time, you know, China's been one of my big focuses. One of the reasons I came into the Trump campaign at Breitbart. For years, we were talking about the threat. I'm not a rising China, the threat of the Chinese Communist Party and how it was getting more radicalized over time and how it had hegemonic designs on the world. And it was really the reporting of the Epoch Times that so impressed me. I kind of figured who are the writers of this paper, because you don't really hear much about it, but the reporting is so amazing. And so one of the ways I learned about Huawei was reading the Epoch Times. And of course, we've done additional research,
Right.
but I got to tell you, the Epoch Times has led the reporting on so many different verticals in China today, I think, to give you a pretty good picture of the enslavement of the Chinese people. With this thing, they call it a trade war President Trump's in. He's not. This is an economic war that the Chinese Communist Party has visited on the West, the industrial democracies. And what we have today, we have a world system that's half slave and half free. Okay? The slaves, they've enslaved the workers of China. Okay? And they have taken basically all the value away from them. They give them de minimis wages, no health care, terrible environmental conditions, no pensions, or virtually no pensions, and they're worked to death and to make cheaper goods for the West at slave wages. And that's what this whole battle is about. The defining event, I believe, in the first half of the 21st century is the freedom of the Chinese people. Only the Chinese people can free the Chinese people. It can't come from the Westerners. It can't come from outsiders. What we can do is, I think what President Trump's doing, is put the spotlight on people like Xi, put the spotlight on Wang Qishan, put the spotlight on the Stability Force, put the spotlight on what they do to the Uyghurs, on what they do to the Falun Gong, what they do to the underground Christian church, the underground Catholic church, the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan Buddhist, and all the decent kids in Hong Kong. You see the mask ripped off them. When you see the tear gas, you see the beatings, you see the rubber bullets, you see exactly what they are. This is a gangster organization that doesn't believe in any individual. The president is sending a warning shot to corporate America that the Chinese Communist Party has engaged in economic warfare against the West for a number of decades. President Trump is the first person to stand up, the first president to stand up. He's not going to back off. But I think he's given fair warning to the corporations. This economic war, which trade is a part of it, is not going to end on Monday morning. It's going to go for a ways. And you've been warned. You know, I've been trying to tell you that that it's not a stable environment over there to invest, but you better start thinking about bringing your supply chain back to the West.
We have agreed and the topics on which we have made headway, biodiversity, digital economy, amongst others.